presentation is the future of the past, and I'm going to tell you something about the project, which is about literature and literary past in Serbia. But it can be, you can also imagine that I'm speaking about the culture in general or any other topic. We heard yesterday a lot about the archives and digging through the archives, and this is kind of an archive, but a digital archive that we try to make it, of course, with the usage of other archives and various sources. So when I say the future of the past, I think of the long tradition of women's writing in Serbia. It started in the middle century, and we decided when we formed the database, we decided that we will stop with the authors who printed their materials up to 1915, which actually takes us to the middle of the 20th century. During the school days in Serbia, one could learn about up to 5 women writers in general. You can learn about, I will just give you some names, although they probably do not mean much to you, but whatever. Isidora Sekulic and Desanka Maksimovic, these are the 2 most important ones. And most recently, also thanks to the project Knjiženstvo about Jelena Dimitrijević, and maybe about some other 2 writers. These are 5 women during the whole education, mostly. And you would think that it would be better in academia, that we would expect more for the studies in Serbian language and culture, but actually it doesn't happen. There are still men are prevailing, and it seems that literature is almost completely in Serbian written by men. So this was the main reason why we started the project in 2011, Knjiženstvo, about women's writing. And the full name of the project, as you could see, is here, Theory and History of Women's Writing in Serbian until 1915, and the project consists of the electronic database, which is open source, so you can just go there. If you are interested, I can give you the address, and there is no, we will not ask you anything. You don't have to, make kind of login thing and so on, nothing. So you can just go there and read about whatever interests you. And also there is the journal Knjiženstvo, which is about literature and gender and culture in general in all the cultures. And we also publish some articles about women's writing in Turkish women writing. I think so far at least 3 articles were about it. The idea of the database about the women writers who had written in Serbian or languages which preceded it in this period that I mentioned stemmed from the Cost Action Women Writers in History, which had similar database. Namely, 15 years ago, I was in Utrecht and I met the creator of that database on European authors, and this is the occasion where I put the first entry about one of the Serbian women writers in there. And later on, I was one of the members of that COST project. We worked on the database, and then we decided that we want a similar database, but somehow not exactly the same, because that database was based on the reception. And you can do that if you have a culture which is a huge culture with a lot of impact, but not from the small language and small culture because it's not translated enough. So you're again, how to say, colonized if you think in that way. So we needed to inform also a Serbian audience, pupils, students, about the women authors who wrote in this long period of time, and everybody would told us, how many authors do you think you can find? And we started very modestly with, like we said, well, about 30 to 40, and now we have in our database 176 names, most of them with some crucial data or even more, and and some we have only know by name and by one word. And we also brought into our database the translators, the writers of various kinds of books, because we think this is important to know and to induce the further research. That's the main idea of the database. Actually, I like to say that the database is like a garden. You have to tend the garden. You have to bring in new seeds, or you have to take care of the plants you already have in there, and it takes your attention and a lot of things to care about. But I would also like to say that this was not the brand new idea. Actually, the basic ideas were not completely new. So you can see this is the front page of the journal Knjiženstvo, which is completely, that journal is electronic journal. It's not in paper. You can find it on the Knjiženstvo website. And we do have abstracts, and sometimes we have texts, also texts in English, and interviews are all the time. We have interviews both in Serbian and in English. That's some kind of a policy. And what you see on this front page is actually an excerpt from a text written by Slobodanka Pejković a long time ago, sometime in the 70s. And she also had the idea of making a project, Women in Literature, the presence and achievement of women writers in the recent Serbian literature. Of course, there was no database in that time in the 70s. And of course, I would say, thinking about our patriarchal culture, it was rejected. 20 years later, without knowing about anything about this project, I tried to do something similar with the Open Society Fund, and I was rejected again. So in 2011, when I started, in 2010 actually, when I started to create this database, this project, I thought there must be the database in it, of course, because we want to reach as wide audience as possible. Here you can see about the word. In Slavic languages, you can immediately recognize that there is, it sounds like a mixture of the word for literature and for womanhood, but actually it's an old word. We didn't make it up. It originates in Renaissance Dubrovnik's language, and it meant literature in general. That means just for that. But now, thanks to the project, it has another meaning. It's women's writing itself, and also the research of women's writing. And I'm really happy to say that it's being used. For instance, you can see here the Knjiženstveni grad. That's the title of one very, very good book about the women's literary canon in Serbian prose, which was published like 6 years ago, I think. So the word is spreading, and that's the important point. What were the basic sources for the research? This is the publication Srpkinja, which was published 110 years ago. And it consists a large number of women portraits. Stana wrote a PhD dissertation about these portraits and creation of the women's portraits in this publication. So we could say that this was the beginning of the effort to present important women. These were not just women writers, there were teachers and some other important women. And also we used the bibliography of women's books, which was published in 1936. And I will give you now the title pages. This is the publication Srpkinja, which means Serbian woman, from 1913. And this is the bibliography of the books written by women writers in 1936, which means that this topic has been interesting for a long while, and it was worked on it. And also, when you open this bibliography, at the end of it, if there are any librarians among you, you will understand this completely. There are indexes which are, there is a librarian. the indexes are so well done that you can see that what is the idea of the database, that this is like a good indexes just made digital, and you can search only for the translation, you can search only for the original text and things like that. So, and this was all, of course, done by a team made of women back there in 1936. What can you find in our database? In database, you can find basic biographical and bibliographical data on female authors, information about their mutual influences, what they read, connections with other Serbian and foreign writers. Sometimes you can find the text. This is not a full text database, but we do link everything that we can find. So if a book as a whole is digitized and put on internet, we link it. We do these things, but we don't ourselves. Actually, the project has ended at the end of 2019. But it goes on as a platform under the same title, Knjiženstvo, and you will see later just a little changed subtitle. So you can find a lot of information, and for some authors, as I said, you cannot find much because we have only their texts published somewhere, and if we are not sure, we just about these the date of birth and date of death, we just mark this in a special way, because these are the things that you have to enter into the database. For instance, this is Yelena Dimitrijević. I hope you can see. The entry about Yelena Dimitrijević is, I think, the fullest one in our database. We know a lot about her. As I said at the beginning, she is new in the school reading canon, and we are very happy about that. And we did a lot to get her there. And also, what may be very interesting for you, she wrote a lot about Turkish women. She has a whole Turkish cycle of her works. She started to write somewhere to publish at the end of the 19th century, and all the way to the 1912, she wrote about Turkish women in Niš, where she lived, and in other places. And a long time later, when she went to United States, she wrote probably the first Serbian travelogue about the United States. She compared American women very much to Turkish women. Why? She said at one point that she was the happiest among the Muslim women when she lived there. She also spoke Turkish. That was the important part. So she might be very interesting author. And of course, you can go to the English side and read about her. But not all the authors are very lucky to have so much space. Okay, so some more photos. This is from the conference when the Knjiženstvo database was first time presented. That was more a draft of the database. It was in 2011. We had only 10 authors at that time. Now, Knjiženstvo platform, which is not the project anymore, just a number of us who are enthusiastic about it and want to keep our garden to grow and spread it. We are also members of the Women Writers in History Daria group. As I said, the project was closed in December of 2019. We were presented a prize just before the COVID pandemic started. That's the end of February. This is the ceremony of receiving the prize, feminist prize, Angelka Milic. And also there is another part of the legacy, which I will spoke very briefly. These are the publications. We managed to take from the manuscript from the National Library to transcribe the manuscript of a very important travelogue through India by Yelena Dimitrijević, and also her French poems, a collection of her French poems. So it's published now. It's not anymore only in the library, it's been there for longer than 100 years. So, and Also, we have the section about the periodicals, but it hasn't been used enough. I can say that because it's, for instance, the European database of women writers, they didn't have this section. And when we started working on it, we understood why. This is a whole new project to fill this in, but still there are some important periodicals in it. And as we became the platform, we now engaged in some different activities which might be interesting to you. For us, for instance, we imagined genocentric walks through Belgrade with the stops at important places for women writers. We joined the Women Writers Route, which is now one of the cultural routes of the Council of Europe. And last year in Belgrade, at the beginning of this, there was a big exhibition of the 3 authors who are now in the school canon, Jelena Dimitrijević, Isidora Sekulić, and Desanka Maksimović. And when we think of the future of the past of the women's writing, we think of application at all levels of teaching, use our database for your teaching at all the levels, which is not really easy to convince people to do so. Application outside the academia and schools like these genocentric walks. And what we need, of course, is securing funds, being constantly present on the internet, in the open source, protect our legal rights, and fight for our future existence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Biljana, for this very informative overview and also the achievements of the Serbian colleagues in this direction. Our next speaker today is Valentina Mitkova. He's associate professor at in the history of book and reading, but also in women's and gender history at Sofia University Kliment Ohridski. She's going to talk about a representation of Turkish women during the Kemalist reforms in the 1920s and the 1930s. What's yours?
Just a second. First, thank you very much for organizing this conference and for inviting us so that we can meet colleagues and share our research on various aspects of women's history. As Professor Skalova mentioned, my presentation will focus on the representation of Turkish women, their changing status in the context of Republican Turkey and also in the context of the Kemalist social political reforms, how this changing status was represented on the pages of the Bulgarian women's press. So, to start with, the Bulgarian women's press can be studied as an independent category of the expanding public sphere within the modernization context, specific to the newly established Bulgarian nation-state, marked by the development of print culture, the growth of literacy, and the increase of leadership, which stimulated more pluralistic writing, as well as problematization of specific realities related to women. The development of women's press in Bulgaria was primarily associated with the names of the first women professionally engaged in editorial and publishing activities who were sensitive to the various forms of female exclusion and discrimination from the sphere of education and in relation to various social and political rights. According to their writing principles and editorial policy, women's periodicals in northern Bulgaria from the end of the 19th century till the 1940s, when was the end of its autonomous existence, can be divided into two large groups: periodicals with a clearly stated individualist feminist discourse, according to Karen Offan's classification of the historically existed feminisms, and women's newspapers and magazines that consciously avoided open politicization, usually labeled as household periodicals. Explicitly feminist press, led mostly by women associated with Bulgarian women's organizations, written by activists of the Bulgarian women's movement, feminist, socialist, communist, discussed specific gender aspects of women's existence, focused on topical social and political issues concerning the situation of the second sex in the country. The group of the household periodicals, here defined as relational feminists, seek to modernize its readership within the framework of the women's world understood as the private sphere of the home and family. The ambition of such projects to inform, enlighten, and form cultural attitudes among Bulgarian women was often paralleled with the pursuit of utilitarian and educational tasks such as improving morality, household skills, health and pedagogical culture, literary taste, and attitude to fashion. Aimed at that task, incorporating relational feminist arguments into their rhetoric, household periodicals did not limit themselves to the ideal reconstruction of the female world in its private dimensions. Becoming an invariable part of the national popular culture, the household press had an unexpected political and social subversive effect. It actively contributed to the social and personal awareness of Bulgarian women and helped their political mobilization, thereby supporting the cause of explicitly feminist newspapers to change public attitudes towards the so-called women's question. In addition to their commitment to women's situation in the native context, Bulgarian women's periodicals, regardless of their rhetoric and typology, also realized their mission through strong sensitivity to gender regimes beyond national borders. Their continuous oscillation between the local and the global, the parallels drawn between native and foreign realities through the lens of the women's question, on the one hand, aimed at locating the struggles of the Bulgarian women's movement in the context of world emancipatory developments, and on the other, at stimulating the self-awareness and subsequent fulfillment of Bulgarian women as autonomous, socially significant subjects. A bright illustration of the above national sensitivity of Bulgarian women's press between the two world wars was the strong resonance that the changes affecting Turkish women from 1923 onwards in the context of the establishment of the Turkish Republic received on the pages of a number of women's periodicals. The attention they paid to the changing status of Turkish women in the context of Kemalist social political reforms could be thought of as motivated by the function of women's periodicals in general and its Bulgarian version in particular to make sense of public interventions in the course of national modernization, to operate as a field where collective female identities were constructed and reconstructed. Excuse me. So how did the mentioned transformative process related to Turkish women reflect on the pages of Bulgarian women's press with explicitly feminist and household profile? As a representative of the first group, I have chosen to focus on the already mentioned Ženski Glas, a women's voice. The mouthpiece of the Bulgarian Women's Union and the most continuously published women's periodical in post-liberation Bulgaria, the newspaper was the only printed defender of the goals and demands of the first broad national organization of Bulgarian women for full civil and political rights. It declared itself as a pillar of the women's gender in the country, of its dignity, social well-being, and awareness. During its long existence, Women's Voice changed several editorial committees and editors-in-chief, among them prominent activists of the women's movement in Bulgaria, such as Anna Karima, Yulia Malinova, Zhenya Buzilova-Ateva. During the interwar period, after the 14th Congress of the Bulgarian Women's Union, the feminist Dimitrana Ivanova was elected as the new editor-in-chief of the newspaper. It was thanks to her personality and selfless work for the women's cause that the newspaper registered the highest number of subscribers, gained the strongest social and political response, and became a powerful tool for channeling feminist ideas. The women's question in neighboring Turkey preoccupied women's voice even before the establishment of the Republic and the subsequent reforms. Such were the articles on the development of the women's movement in Turkey after the Young Turk Revolution, on the rising literacy of Turkish women and the expansion of their horizons, on women's support given to the liberals, etc. Between the two world wars, the materials about Turkish women which reflected on the pages of the newspaper corresponded with the central themes of the same, articulating the main demands of the Bulgarian feminists. Among those themes was the discriminatory policy of the Bulgarian state regarding the professional realization of women. Gender asymmetries in the field of professions were unmasked by the newspaper in relation to the situation of Bulgarian women teachers, lawyers, clerks, nurses, as well as via the treatment of women's work in general. With its materials, Women's Voice constantly informed its readers about public actions and feminist pressure on governmental and parliamentary authorities on that occasion, commented on the decisions taken at the Congresses of the Union of Bulgarian Lawyers, wrote on the tensions surrounding the clerical question, etc. Within that context, during the 1920s and 30s, in separate issues of the newspaper as articles or brief news, many texts referring to the new spaces for professional realization open for Turkish women were published. Articles such as A Turkish Woman Lawyer and the Women Lawyers in Turkey from 1928, for example, reported that Miss Süreyya Ahmed, a law graduate who had completed her compulsory internship at the Ministry of Justice, became the first woman to be enrolled as a full-time lawyer in the district court in Angora. Her debut in civil court as the plaintiff's trustee in her divorce case aroused unprecedented public interest and was presented as the real triumph. The example in the field of law was soon followed by other cases of young women who were expected to soon take over the office of notary. The bitter comment of the editorial staff, which was placed as an afterword to one of the articles, was quite indicative. And in our country, it noted, they are still debating the right of women lawyers to advocate, whether the law allows it or not. In the context of an article from 1935 written by Dimitrana Ivanova and thematizing on the holding of the International Women's Congress in Istanbul in the same year, this was the Congress of the International Alliance of Women for Suffrage and Equal Citizenship, it could be read, "The Turkish woman studies without hindrance in the schools, lower, middle, and higher. She is a teacher, a clerk, a lawyer, a judge, a doctor, an engineer, an architect. There are no restrictions for her to hold a public office or exercise a liberal profession." And further, there are no restrictions for a married woman to hold office. She is a municipal councillor, mayor, member of the parliament. She generally grows with the consciousness of social obligations and social responsibility. During the interwar period, a crucial topic for the editors of Women's Voice and for the Bulgarian Women's Union, respectively, remained the political representation of women. Although in 1937 Bulgarian women received the right to vote for municipal councils and the parliament, the adopted legislation was highly restrictive. Women's political rights were defined through their relationship with men, and only married women, divorcees, and widows received the right to vote. And more than that, voting was mandatory for men voters and optional for women voters. How did Women's Voice relate the lack of political representation of the then Bulgarian women to the situation of their contemporaries in neighboring Turkey? In an article from the 1930s, the newspaper commented on the positive changes in the lives of Turkish women, it was noted that the Turkish woman is quite free from a social point of view, but politically she has not yet achieved her emancipation. However, the text was quick to highlight the activism of the growing Turkish Women's Union, which was not only a philanthropic association, but also a group created to achieve full equality between men and women in their social and political rights. Following the current Turkish developments regarding the women's question, in 1935, the newspaper reported that Turkish women had finally obtained complete liberation and had been recognized as equal citizens of their country. This was marked by the election of the first women representatives in the Turkish parliament, and what was labeled as revival and revolution by prominent Turkish women as Nesil Tevfik and Halide Nusret, who were quoted by the newspaper, was summarized in a 1936 article entitled "The Turkish Woman," where we could read, "Marriage, divorce, and inheritance are no longer regulated according to the old church regulations, but according to the new freedom loving law, a translation of the Swiss civil law. The Turkish woman freely participates with the man in public life. Her education is not limited in any aspect. 1/3 of the students in the university are now young women." Okay, so I will be in a hurry, and another interest aspect of my focus on the representation of the changing status of Turkish women on the pages of Bulgarian women's periodicals was the group of household periodicals. I will just mention that the articles which were published on this topic were predominantly reflected and commented on within the relational feminist rhetoric, which was typical for the newspapers belonging to this group. This rhetoric made them focus on changing women's status, mainly within the home, family, understood through the new progressive socially visible women's positioning, as I said, in spheres such as family, fashion, modern forms of public communication, but also related to the breakthrough of women in professional fields, traditionally monopolized by men, as well as to the issues concerning their political representation. I will show you. These are visual materials from a representative belonging to this group, Women's Journal, Vesnik na Ženata. The accents related to the changing status of Turkish women commented on the pages of this periodical were the new marriage law, which was adopted in Turkey, which was labeled as perhaps the most significant reform of Mustafa Kemal Pasha. Marriage reform was interpreted as a tool for improving women's situation, and it was very important for the newspaper. Another accent that I could outline is the increasing number of women participating in professions, mainly profession of lawyers and judges, these professions with high social reputation and well paid, which were previously monopolized by men. And maybe an interesting accent just to focus on was the notion by the newspaper that the increasing number of women practicing the professions of lawyers and judges and other professions have not at all pushed the Turkish women, as wrote the newspaper, out of the house and family. And in support of that observation, the newspaper reported that a large household school was recently opened in Ankara, teaching knowledge of running an exemplary modern household. And also, each woman student was also trained in another craft in order to help her husband or to be able to provide for herself if she needed in her life. Again, women's representation in the field of intellectual activities was also a topic commented on the pages of household periodicals and Nationata respectively. The appearance of more and more women in literature, in art, in music, and so on. And as I've mentioned, this visual layer, which was very active. And here you can see that in both Bulgarian and Turkish context, there were opponents to this changing status of women, their political representation. The one on the left, it was noted in the newspaper, Bulgarian one, that it was reprinted, this one, it was reprinted from the Turkish press without naming the concrete periodical. But it bears a great resemblance to the one that caricatures that circulates in Bulgarian press, again, ignoring this women's aspiration to be politically represented. And another photo showing a Turkish woman 10 years ago, wild in her Ferizeh, and today's young Turkish woman dressed in a riding suit going to the Ankara Hippodrome. This was a visual illustration. So I will finish just one sentence for conclusion. So this detailed tracing of modernizing and emancipatory developments referring to the women's gender in the neighboring Turkish context could be thought of as one of the channels of feminist ideas in modern Bulgaria, aimed simultaneously at increasing public sensitivity to gender asymmetries in the Bulgarian realities and at the solidarity of women in the country, but it also to a great extent articulated the entangled histories on the Balkans. Balkan societies passing through similar phases of political, cultural, and social development, transforming on the basis of close modernization process and demonstrating parallel trends. Thank you very much for your attention.
Our next speaker is Stanislava Barac, Associate Professor from Belgrade again. She has a book on women's periodicals in Serbia, and today she is going to talk about the privileged representation of new Turkish woman in Belgrade's magazine Žena danas, Women's Today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Krasimira, and thank you all for being here. Okay. So it is about the privileged representation of the new Turkish woman in this specific Belgrade's magazine, Woman Today, Žena danas, which was run from 1936 to 1940. The methodology used in this case study and in the last 2 decades of my research and some of my friends is periodical studies. It is an interdisciplinary field developed mostly from literary studies, especially literary history. For over 50 years, periodical studies have been officially conducted in my Institute for Literature and Art in Belgrade and within the Research Society for Victorian Periodicals, which is an international society, while it also evolved in the last 20 years in Europe and in the USA with the rise of digitization of periodical material. Periodical studies lead the researchers inevitably deeper into historiography and archival work, as well as to social and political theory, because of the need to understand the agency of discourses, which means ideologies found in the particular periodicals, and also to cultural studies, because periodicals are part of everyday literary and political life. Periodical studies engage subdisciplines and methods developed in these frames, such as media studies, critical discourse analysis, transnational history, entangled history, as mentioned. However, the researcher always begins with the close reading of a text, the article of a text, and the understanding of its meaning in a particular context or contexts. And in this case of Women Today and articles about New Turkish Women in Women Today, there are at least 4 important contexts. European women's movements, both liberal and socialist. They are intertwining in the interwar period in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia in the idea of a new woman elaborated by Alexandra Kollontai. Then the other important context is a student movement against king's dictatorship in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, which was organized in 1931, where a wide group of female students gradually, through the protest against the regime and the king and the dictatorship, gradually raised their consciousness as political subjects. With the initial anti-dictatorship political demands, they were simultaneously developing their anti-capitalist and anti-patriarchy attitudes. Both of them, anti-patriarchy attitudes and anti-capitalist, came from their own living experiences. And this group of women developed a strong anti-fascist attitude from the very first explicit speeches they heard from Germany. As Isidora Grubački explained, this way they formed a whole new political generation. At some point, they turned manifestly to the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. This party was illegal at the time. This whole process I explained, from student movement to politicization, is a pure example of politicization from below. Then the third important context for this magazine is the global anti-fascist movement, which was developing under the Communist International from 1934, and it became an official policy in the form of the Popular Front strategy adopted in 1935 at the 7th Congress of Comintern. This young group of Yugoslav women was already ready for it, I would say. The fourth context is the already established public debate in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, civil public sphere and feminist culture public. And in this debate about the women's emancipation, from the very beginning of the 1920s, Ottoman heritage in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Yugoslavia as a whole, Ottoman heritage was seen as the obstacle to women's emancipation. The position of a majority of Muslim women in their families and in society was understood as something that should be, if possible, changed immediately in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, officially determined to modernization. The issue was too sensible, though, and the writing about revolutionary changes in the Republic of Turkey from 1923 onwards was often used as a cipher or a code for young Muslim potential readers from Yugoslavia, because that was the content that was used instead of writing about Yugoslav female Muslim experiences alone. A Popular Front strategy meant not just making anti-fascist political coalitions, but also the mobilization of the passive or unpoliticized masses. The Communist International turned to women additionally. Researcher Jasmine Calver argues that the Women's World Committee Against War and Fascism, which was established in Paris in 1934, with its magazine, that's the first one, Women in the Global Action in English. So Jasmine Calver argues that this Women's World Committee was used to test the Popular Front strategy before its official adoption. I argue, as shortly was explained, that women in Kingdom of Yugoslavia and in other countries in the world were already politicized in an anti-fascist direction. That is why it was easy to establish Women's World Committee's sections all around the world and to start running their official magazines. And we see other magazines of Women's World Committee Against War and Fascism from Chile, Germany, France, Italy, and Great Britain. My thesis is that women already knew what to do. The politics conducted from the top met with the developments already happening from below. Illustrated women's magazines, they all choose to publish illustrated women's magazine because that is a genre and a form that corresponded with the policy of Popular Front, of a wide political coalition. All women could read it, and all women educated and lower educated are reading, especially at that time, illustrated women's magazines. Woman Today was one of these magazines. They all, at the same time, adjusted Popular Front policy to the local specificities of the country and women's emancipation in the local context. The editorial board of Women Today managed to develop a complex editorial policy. They appeal simultaneously to the highly educated, semi-literate, and even illiterate audience at the same time. And it brought together abstract political and entertaining content. And all of that they managed to do while they were illegal and couldn't be visible to the public, the editorial board of Women Today. Women Today carefully organized its articles, especially in the first issue, which is always a manifesto issue. Putting the article of Gabrielle Duchesne as the very first manifesto article of the Woman Today, signed with her title of the President of the Women's World Committee Against War and Fascism, this group of Yugoslav women clearly positioned themselves among this organization. The second manifesto article is unsigned and belongs to the editorial board. Both of them are telling the readers that anti-fascism and the task of preserving world peace is a new field of work for women, and that is a new feminism. What is significant is that the next article, the very first non-editorial journalistic article, is the one about the new Turkish woman in a newly established Republic of Turkey. There were at least 5 reasons for such an editorial decision, I would say. The first one is that the transformation that happened in Turkey was a kind of revolution. It was not a communist one, but it was a deep revolutionary secular transformation, which was good enough as an example. The wider and specifically women's audience or public sphere was already, that's the other reason for putting this article about a new Turkish woman at the beginning. The wider female audience was familiar with the women's emancipation that occurred within the other Turkey reforms, thanks to other articles in other women's periodicals. It was considered an appropriate way to activate and politicize young Muslim women in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia by the example editors believed would be close to them. Muslim women and also uneducated women of Bosnia and Herzegovina were seen as having a great potential to be won over by the idea of a revolution, of a simultaneous class and feminist revolution. The first reason to write about new Turkish women was strictly what was strictly prohibited to write explicitly in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, a call for a socialist revolution, was possible to implicitly convey through the idea of rapid progress. The transformation of women's position and their real lives in the Republic of Turkey was a perfect example of it, of rapid progress. Women Today, in other words, developed for its readers a whole new mimicry language. And the fifth reason for publish this article at the beginning was that the author was an international theatrical star, celebrity, and for that reason a kind of authority. And this is the author of the article. This is Bahrija Nuri Hadžić. She was born in Sarajevo in 1904, Austro-Hungarian monarchy at the time, in a wealthy and progressive Muslim family. As well as her three sisters, she got a perfect European education, and their parents followed their talent and her talent. Thus, after the music education in Belgrade and Vienna, Bahrija became an opera singer and became a true opera star in Switzerland, in Bern, and internationally. She settled at Belgrade Opera, and she was often a guest at the Istanbul Opera too. As Fabio Giomi noted in his recent book, Bahrija Nuri Hadžić's story invalidated the theory of Muslim backwardness and passivity in the cultural domain and showed that they, too, Muslims, could make a fruitful contribution to national cultural life they meant in Yugoslavia. The reportage, Bahrija Nuri Hadžić in Istanbul, is not only about Istanbul, it's a kind of portrait of a new Turkish woman. The editorial will not discover its source. We are bringing you a few exciting parts from the lecture of our favorite theatrical artist, Ms. Bahrija Nuri Hadžić, on the topic of the new Turkish woman, which she held at the Oral Newspapers event of the Journalistic Association. The photographs you see in the article, I hope. The photographs used as illustrations also expressed women today's policy of gathering higher class and lower class, educated and uneducated women. The photographs tell the readers that women became judges in the Republic of Turkey, like the upper one, and that was something that women in other parts of the world cannot even dream about. And also the other photographs tells that illiterate women are cared about in Turkey and that they are getting the basic education they need. The reportage itself is composed as a contrastive narrative. It tells the readers how it is now in that time, now in Istanbul and Turkey, and how it was and still is in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in Yugoslavia. For example, this is the part of the article. Bahrija Nuri Hadžić wrote, "When I was still a little child, before the war, First World War, she thinks, an acquaintance of ours from Sarajevo, Hayriya G, moved to Turkey. Veiled in dimes and aliens, Hayriya moved to Istanbul. I thought I would never see her again. But recently, when I was at a wedding party in Istanbul, I accidentally bumped into Hayriya. She was a true European woman. She did not at all look like Hayriya who lived before the war in dimes and the veil on her face. To her, the past was like a horrible dream. Is it possible," that is Hayriya asking the author of the article, "is it possible, my dear, that women in Bosnia still veil themselves? Did you see what our Ghazi did?" And then Bahrija explains, around Hayriya stood her children. One of her daughters is 15, attends gymnasium, and speaks English perfectly. What I think is that the article sent a double message or multiple messages. The article stresses the idea of rapid progress at two levels at least. The author, opera singer Bahrija Nuri Hadžić, experienced this idea of rapid progress in her own home and her life. Women readers can see, however, how it could happen when every single woman, when the whole state and its laws reform in a revolutionary way. But Bahrija does not speak only about women because she knows that revolution should involve the majority. She speaks in the name of Bosnian Muslim men who are accused of being lazy, drinking coffee all day, and sitting in the dark and their own ignorance. Bahrija argues that Muslims from Bosnia, who moved to the Ottoman Empire earlier, became the most progressive element of Kemal Atatürk's Turkey, Kemal just gave the opportunity to their brightness and hardworking habits, and they allegedly came to the first line of new Turkish society. Every discursive utterance like this one in the articles of Women Today had the same final goal: the unification of potential revolutionary forces in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and their mobilization. That also applies to the representation of the new Turkish woman, which alternates, as we saw, with the representation of non-emancipated Bosnian Muslim women and Bosnian immigrants to Turkey. It is a coded appeal to the readers, Muslim youth and Muslim women before all, to join the global anti-fascist struggle and through it to the imagined social revolution, which happened during the war in Yugoslavia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella, also for keeping the time. Our next speaker is Dr. Caterina Dallacura, who is Associate Professor at the University of Crete in Rethymno. And her presentation is about women and diplomacy, representations of Turkish Republic and Turkish women's activities in the interworld Greek feminist periodicals.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here today with us, and also patient, attending such a long panel with too many presenters. I will present sitting there because I have my paper in my computer, and Stella will help me with my PowerPoint. Okay. As it features in the program of the conference, the title of my presentation is Women in Diplomacy, something which is really the main core interest in the program, research program we participated, and I will talk to you about it. Representations of the Turkish Republic and Turkish women activity in interworld Greek feminist periodicals. The paper I'm going to present here, as well the papers of Krasimira, Ivanova, and Valentina, are included in an ongoing research project entitled Feminisms and Politics in the Interwar Balkans, 1923-1939. This project is supported by the Hellenic Foundation for Research and Innovation. It's hosted by the University of Crete and is set by me. 11 researchers and faculty members participate in this project, and they are from Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia. You're seeing 4 members here, as well as from Slovakia and the USA. The duration of the project is 3 years. It was launched in February 2022 and will go on until January 2025. Krasimira said a lot about our work. I want just to talk a little bit about the objective and to associate it with the topic of the articles about all features in the periodicals concerning Muslim women or women from Turkey. The objective of the project is to recover this research project we are involved, is to recover, document, and analyze the collaborations of interworld feminist and women's associations in the Balkan and partly Central European countries, and to explore the entanglement of their activities and feminist policies with the politics and diplomacy in the region during the interwar period. Based on our research results so far, we could argue at that moment that the objectives of these regional Balkan and Central European initiatives and collaborations were predominantly and deeply political, interwoven with contemporary political challenges in the region, and intersected with the foreign policies of the associated countries, albeit not always in the same way for all associations, and with the Balkan and Central European diplomacy. So in this context of this research, and its central research question, which I just talked about, the participation of Turkish feminist organizations in these regional collaborations or their absence is an interesting issue to be explored, as Turkish women participated to a limited extent in some of these initiatives, while were absent from others. References to women and feminism in Turkey, as well as to New Turkey, the Greek feminist publications were made in the context of these collaborations, being informed by the specific goals and aspirations of the Greek feminist organizations participating in them. Now, let's show which were those feminist collaborations in Balkans and how and which some of them. Okay, so these initiatives were a little band of women. I think Krasi talked to you about it. Reestablished little band of women, which actually included only the countries which were only the associations which were from the countries with the alliance of Lithuania and the political, the defensive Lithuania, the Union of Slavic Women, the Women's Balkan Conferences, and also we include in these collaborations the participation of the Balkan feminist organizations and associations into the Balkan Conference and Balkan as institution and Balkan conferences, which was an initiative by other political actors. But they participated, so we included into the steps. So reference to Turkish women and New Turkey made in the Greek periodicals were related to the Little of women, as you can see, and the Balkan conferences, and not to one because they were not related. Now, for this work, I draw on some Greek feminist journals of the time, and those are the journal, The Woman's Struggle, which was the organ of the Hellenic League for Women's Rights Organization. This organization was member of the Internet of Women and participated also consistently and actively in all Balkan conferences. Was also a member. It's not here. Okay, never mind. I think I have this. This organization, the Hellenic League for Women's Rights, was member of the International Women's Rights Alliance. It is really important, I think, this to know it, because it shows the feminism this feminist organization represented. The other periodical was Hellenist, which was the organ of the National Council of Greek Women. This organization, feminist organization, participated in the Balkan conferences as well as in the Little conferences, but not as a member, but as a fraternal delegation. And the third one is the newspaper, Efimerides των Ελληνίδων, the Greek women's newspaper, which was a weekly newspaper, published not by an association, but a woman, which was a feminist and member of the League, the Hellenic League for Women's Rights. Now, all articles and announcements and news on these periodicals are made in the frame of discussions about Little Band of Women or conferences. So I won't talk about the Little Band of Women because you know it, and I'm going to see just to present here these articles. Okay. So, Yılında of Women was this, let's say, Balkan and Central European association. But it's important to know that apart from the common goals they promoted, because they were targeting actually to promote the feminist issues all over the region, and besides to eliminate discord among the member countries and help to develop sincere collaboration among them, with the ultimate aim to preserve peaceful relations and thereby ensuring global peace. So it seems that all of them were targeting the same goals. Despite these common goals, each national feminist organization participated in the establishment of Litland, having its own political agenda, which, as the research gradually reveals, sought to strengthen the national foreign policy of their countries, or at least was in line with it. So, coming now, in the case of the Hellenic League for Women's Rights, as documented by the initiatives undertaken within the Litland of Women, and the explicit statement made by its president, Abra Theodoropoulou, later in another speech, later meaning quite later from the time Litland of Women was established. So this explicit statement, which was made in a speech of her during the first Balkan conference, shows that very clearly that the aim of the Hellenic League for Women's Rights participation in the Litland of Women was to work towards the formation of a Balkan Federation. It was very, very clearly stated. In this context, already at the first Litland of Women conference in Bucharest in 1923, the issue of the dream of a federation among the nations of Eastern Europe was addressed. Next year, at the Belgrade Litland of Women conference, a more detailed and concrete reference was made to this dream of federation, which in this occasion included Romania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, and Turkey, implicitly transforming this Greek representative, transformed the Eastern European Federation to a Balkan. The issue was introduced again at the fourth Litland of Women conference in Prague in 1927, where a questionnaire was prepared with the intention of exploring the suggested means of securing peace and progress in the region global. The Balkan Federation issue featured in the questionnaire with a specific question addressing it as a means of maintaining peace in the region, while also exploring the use of the Litland of Women policy on the issue and its members' will and ability to undertake relevant actions. The question in the questionnaire was, what is going to be the public opinion in case of establishing a Balkan Federation? And of course, some other questions, if it's going to be something that the members are going to do about it. But the main question was this. In this context, the first references to Turkey and Turkish feminist and women's organizations were made. Turkey was included in the dream of the future Balkan Federation, while the absence of the Turkish feminist organization from the Litland of Women was noted repeatedly. Our joy of coming together as Balkan sisters, says Abra Theodoropoulou, sisters who were lost for years, this joy was not complete. Our sisters from Turkey and Albania were missed. Although the question of the Litland of Women expansion, as Krasimira mentioned, by including organizations from other Balkan countries, namely Turkey and Albania, or excluding completely all the Balkans, is a discussion which went on. Although this about the Balkan countries was discussed, no decision seemed to have been taken, nor has an application for membership by a Turkish feminist organization has been encountered. In 1930, this is very interesting. In 1930, Latifi Bekir, president of the Turkish Women Union, being interviewed by a Greek woman journalist, answered to the question on the absence of the Turkish women from the Little Land of Women as following. He answered this question about the absence of the Turkish women from the Little Land. It did not, said Latifi Bekir, it did not depend on us, but we have been following the Little Land of Women activities, and I hope that we will be able to participate from next year on. So, although the question of the Turkish women non-participation, because they do not participate in the end, non-participation in the Little Land of Women has not been answered yet for the time being by us, based, we can make some assumptions, based on the strategies in other cases of in other countries. Based on the strategies followed by the other Little Land of Women member organizations and countries, we could assume that Turkish women's participation in the Little Land of Women was probably not approved or encouraged by the Turkish government. Because, for instance, Greece, Czechoslovakia, Romania, where the governments had been informed about the establishment of the Little Land of Women since its very beginning, and encouraged activity and in its context, and supported the participating feminist organizations financially. So have these cases, and we have to answer why Latifi Bekir said exactly this phrase. It wasn't on our cards. By the decade of 1930s, the Little Land of Women member organization started to shift towards other initiatives or planned collaborations that openly serve the foreign policy objectives of their countries, with this new orientation being reflected on the Little Land of Women's declining activities. For instance, the EU conference, the Little Land of Women conference, to be organized in 1928, did not take place, while the last one was in 1929. So the Balkan member organizations of the Little Land of Women shifted to support and participate in the Balkan conferences, while the Central European ones shifted to collaborations which would strengthen the policy of the defensive political Little Land. Romania and Yugoslavia orientating in participating in both of them. 5 minutes. Okay, I'm fine. So this is a period in the Greek feminist periodicals, articles about and references to Turkey and Turkish feminist movements began to appear more frequently. It should be noted that during the previous period, few only references, such as those mentioned above about Turkey participated in the Little Land, found in the women's press, along with 2 resolutions of the Little Land of Women initiated by the Greek organization concerning the protection of Greek minority, namely the patriarchate and the Greek women kept still 2 harems, being indirect action towards critical towards the Turkish government. But from 1929, we won't see such a critique, and oversee different kind of articles. So as I do not have a lot of time, I have just 5 minutes. Four, okay, it's 4. I will try to make, let's say, an abstract of the rest, because I really wanted to be clear all the things I still, at least, I have presented until now. So from 1929, we will see a lot of articles or news or announcements concerning Turkish and Turkish feminism in the periodicals I named before. This now, we could talk about these articles as 2 categories of articles, 2 types of articles. In one periodical, which is that one of that woman editor who is feminist, but she has her own editing policy, there we can see a particular type of articles, but in the other ones, we can see articles that they are very, very appraising everything what it has to do with Turkey. The first one, we will see some prejudice in the discourse of the articles. So I will try to be, this is the concept, first of all, and this is what comes out of the analysis of the discourse of these articles. So, in the first category of the articles, which were written by Greek women journalists, correspondents of the Greek women's newspaper in Constantinople, in Istanbul, Kemal Atatürk's reformative social program was praised. It is noted that it was also noted that women accepted his program with gratitude for the westernization of morals and culture introduced, which brought about very significant consequences to their lives. So in this context, the feminist movement in Turkey is presented,
20 minutes, it's finished.
Yeah.
So,
okay. In this context, the feminist movement in Turkey is presented as a newborn movement in the context of the new Turkey, resulted from the social and legal initiatives of the state, was strengthened by the state propaganda for women's emancipation, and was forming its ideology on the basis of a state-directed and defined feminism. So this movement was very weak, according to this article. It has very limited human resources. And these human resources, which were very limited, were able to, let's say, educate all Turkish women so that to have a wise use of this freedom which came into their lives. This attitude shows one, first of all, absence of contact between the feminisms in Greece and Turkey, and even in Balkans. And besides, some prejudice about this Ottoman past, and this past which gives the identity of the Turkish women as a little bit being backward with all those backward traditions of the Ottoman period. Of course, not very clearly, but saying that they are not all the women able to use this kind of freedom which was given to them, because they were always enslaved and they cannot understand the idea of freedom, and they might use it in the wrong direction, things like that. So all this what I said. But in the other periodicals, which are from the feminist organizations, we can see that they stress, or they are stressing everything which is progress in Turkey. Their electoral success, and they are trying, and they have nothing to do with all this prejudice. Okay, I understand that there's no time, and just I cannot reorganize what I wanted to say. I will say just 2 words, 2 phrases more. The fact that these periodicals present what happened in Turkey and in the Turkish feminism is not only in order to serve these political aims in Balkans and collaborations and getting to know one nation the other. All this serve actually the aims of the Greek feminist organization themselves. And the way they write, they have 2 kinds of audience. On one hand, the feminists, the women in themselves, and on the other, the government. Because whatever was given to Turkish women was given with the help or by the government. So these articles are written in this way so that to serve the aim of the Greek feminism, which was focused on the political rights. Okay, I don't want to say more.
These final words are really important, but I am afraid we don't have time to discuss them because I have a lot to say along these lines as well. You know that we started 10 minutes later. That's why we are now having our last presentation by Ivana Pantelic, who is associate professor at the Institute for New Social History of Serbia. Contemporary history. Serbia, and her presentation is entitled Our New Muslim Woman, Reception of Muslim Women in the Yugoslav Interwar Women's Periodicals, Ženski pokret, Žena i svet, and Jugoslavenska žena. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Grazie. Thank you all for coming and being so patient and listening to us for 2 hours. Okay, I'll try to cut my presentation a bit more, just to speak about one segment of it. And as I need to say that my presentation sort of relies on Stanislava's, and she is the main researcher and the champion for the researching the interwar feminist and women's periodicals in Serbia, Yugoslavia. So the first part of the methodological one, I'm relying on Stanislava, and I'm just gonna continue with these 3 magazines that I choose to present the content of the position of the Muslim woman. A large number of women's organizations which inherited different starting points and different goals of actions existing on the territory of the newly founded and in many aspects heterogeneous state of Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, later called Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Based on the primary goals, 2 types of women organization in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia can be identified. First includes associations that inherited humanitarian route, mostly active within the National Women's Alliance. The second group consists of the socially active women joined the national joined an alliance of the women's movement, an organization based on the demands of the first wave European feminism. But whether they were humanitarian, predominantly humanitarian or feminist, women's societies try to convey their ideas and goals of the Yugoslav public through magazines. For the purposes of this presentation, I analyzed the contents of the 3 women's magazines from the interwar period. First one is Ženski pokret, Women's Movement. It was the first and of the long duration Yugoslav feminist magazine with a distinctly liberal political oriented. It was published by the Feminist Alliance of the Women's Movement and was published almost during the entire interwar period from 1920 up until 1938. And as Stanislava defined it, it represents the central institution of the feminist counter-republic in the interwar period Yugoslavia.
The second one is Yugoslav Woman. It was also a feminist magazine. It was founded in the early 30s as a direct reaction of the dictatorship of the King Alexander Karađorđević, but also as a clearly defined the dissatisfaction and disagreement of the part of the feminist counter-public with the work of the Alliance of Women's Movement. This magazine was not connected to any feminist organization. It was privately published, but and it was published briefly from 1931 until 1934. And I forgot to mention about women's movement, but you can see here that there are 20 articles about Muslim women published in it, and in Yugoslav Women there are 3 articles. And the last one magazine was Žene i Svet, Women and the World. It represented what we could define as a women's magazine. Stanislava classified it in the group of illustrated women's fashion magazines, created according to the model of German women's periodicals in the interwar. It was published from 1925 to 1939, and it also has 20 articles about Muslim women in it and 4 illustrations of Muslim women. The other 2 doesn't have illustrations, not because the editorial policy was that they were not illustrated. Magazines, just one, Žene i Svet, Women in the World, had illustrations. During the interwar period, 43 articles and 4 illustrations which problematized the topic of Muslim women were printed in the above-mentioned magazine. For this presentation, I have divided them into the 3 thematic units. Articles first is article about Muslim women in Kingdom of Yugoslavia, which are the most numerous one, and there are 22 of them. The second are articles about the position of women in Turkey during the Turkish Republic and the great social reforms, and there are 16 articles that problematize this topic. And the third one is about the life and position of Muslim women in the world, and there are 5 articles in total about this topic. And now I'm gonna just speak about the first one, just to be briefly, because those are the numerous one, and I think it was the most important for the Yugoslav public then. The most significant group of text about Muslim women in the Yugoslav interwar women periodicals consist of text about Muslim women in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. I divided this group into 2 subgroups. The first are texts written by the male authors, and the second by female women. Although all the authors were emancipatory oriented, the content of the articles of a certain extent differ between male and female authors. The first text about Muslim women appeared in the women's movement, in the magazine Women's Movement, already in the 4th issue of the first year publishing year. It was the magazine began publishing in April, and in August in 1920, a text by distinguished philosopher and politician Hasan Rebac entitled "The Appearance of Muslim Women Among Yugoslav Sisters" was published. Along with the text, the editorial board of the Women's Movement printed an invitation to interested authors, especially Muslim, I'm quoting, Muslim sisters, to send them text about Muslim women. It was planned that the Women's Movement would regularly publish texts about Muslim women in Yugoslavia. Hasan Rebac wrote 4 extensive texts about origin and position of Muslim women in Yugoslavia. These represent a clear perception of the Muslim woman in a new, complex, multi-ethnic Yugoslav society. Given the fact that Rebac was close to the ruling radical party and was high-ranking state official, his authorship sublimes the attitude of the political and cultural public about what Yugoslav Muslim woman is and what she should be. Rebac wrote the first text as a direct reaction of the incident that happened at the Congress of the National Women's Union of Serbs, Croats, and Slovens and 1920, in which the Muslim woman Rasima Bisic, teacher from Sarajevo, participated for the first time. It was the first time that Muslim women participated in the Women's Congress. Her presence at the Congress was harshly and publicly criticized by Muslim conservative politicians gathered around the party called Yugoslav Muslim Organization. Hasan Rebac publicly opposed them with the text in the women's movement and clearly defended Rasima Bisic. In this text, Rebac tried to place Muslim women in the context of the new Yugoslav state and society. He tried to explain to potential readers Muslim customs and way of life, which most of the population of the new state was unfamiliar with. He points out the phenomena of which Muslim women and Muslim population in general differ from the rest of the most Slavic and Christian population of Yugoslavia. Those were marital polygamy and covering women, veiling women. He wrote about the protected position of the married Muslim woman, but also about the great global social changes after the First World War, after which the large number of women remained widows, which directly meant no public protection. He connected the sudden and forced exposure of the Muslim woman into the public sphere as a consequence of these changes and emphasized the very difficult position, especially of the Muslim women in cities. He addressed directly to Yugoslav Women's Organization and asked them for help for their Muslim sisters and called out the whole Yugoslav population, all Yugoslav citizens, to help their Muslim sisters to integrate as much as possible in the new society. What is interesting in Hasan Rebac's text is actually his definition of the national identity of Yugoslav Muslims. He clearly considered them as ethnic Slavs, predominantly Serbs, who were the Muslim faith. I'm beginning the quotation. There are citizens of the Muslim faith in our country from 3 different nations. First are our Serbo-Croats, but mostly he speaks of them, defines them as Serbs, settled in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Kosovo, and parts of Macedonia. The second are Albanians in parts of Kosovo and Macedonia, and the third are the Turks scattered mainly in the towns of these 2 provinces. The first ones are the most numerous. They speak pure Serbian, they do not know Turkish, and they have a lot of Serbian old costume painted into Islamic religious color. End of quotation. For this identity position, he created a subject of Muslim woman by presenting her as a guardian of the Slav Serb tradition during the Ottoman period. This segment is very important since it does not exclusively represent the position of Hasan Rebac as a public person, but was a part of the official state identity policy. The same thesis was advocated by Hifis Bjelovac, writer, publicist, and translator from Bosnia. While Rebac wrote the text about Muslim women and identity briefly after the Second World War, Bjelovac wrote a little bit later in 1932 in the magazine Woman and World the text he called Our Muslim Woman and Her Social Life. At the very beginning, he emphasized the Slavic origin of the Bosnian Muslim woman. According to his opinion, the only Muslim woman who from the south of Serbia and Macedonia could be Turks. All the others were Slavs. Unlikely, Rebac Bjelovac does not specify the nationality of their Slavic origin, but insists on it. In the second part of the text, Bjelovac describes in detail history of the covering woman. He tried to explain that it was not exclusively a Muslim costume and placed it in the antique and then Christianity and then Islam customs. The text ends with the open criticism of the Muslim costume of veiling women and publicly calls for the removal of the Tsar. Like Rebac, he pointed to the forced emancipation of Muslim women after the First World War, and thought that the covering was enabling them to do any public work. The last text with the male authorship is the article by the prominent writer Hamza Humo, and I borrowed the title of his article, Our New Muslim Woman, for this presentation, which was published in 1926 in Women and the World magazine. The text is extremely emancipatory, and which was not always the case with the editorial policy of this magazine. Humo wrote about a new Muslim woman who is completely completely Europeanized. Europeanization was certainly synonym for the modernization which he problematized on the aesthetic and social level. His new Muslim woman wore a hat instead of scarf, dress instead of a long black covering. She had a great desire to become literate and educated in order to be independent and emancipated. Humo clearly took the side of this new Muslim woman, even though he was aware that she was in the majority and that the resistance for them that she was in the minority and the resistance from the majority of men as well as women was great. And the second subgroup are the texts in text about Muslim women in Yugoslavia are the texts written by women. In neither of texts written by women authors was mentioned the national questions of origin of Muslim women in Yugoslavia. For the women authors, it does not matter whether Muslim women are Slavs, Serbs, or of the Muslim faith, or whether they are Albanians or Turks. For them, their Muslim sisters are enslaved, subjuncted, uneducated, powerless in some segments of society equally, and the others more than other Yugoslav women. The Muslim woman in Yugoslav society was placed in the depths of the private sphere, deeply veiled and invisible to the public. Her sufferings and problems were also invisible to the public. All women authors publicly stood up and advocated the liberation of Muslim women, more intensive inclusion in educational process, and their exit into the public sphere. They saw the achievement of these goals through the agency of women's feminist organizations, but also invited Yugoslav politicians to join their struggle. I'm finished. I won't be bothering you anymore. Just to show you the illustrations from the magazine Women and World. These are clothes of Muslim women from Sarajevo, from capital from Bosnia. So we have this sculpture. I was just translating, and it was the sculpture of modern Muslim woman from 1926. And this one is very nice, full of for Muslim girls in the south of Serbia from 1926 as well. And the last one is the same as Valentina has, about Nevzike Muladim, a president of the Turkish Girl Society, editor of the magazine New World. So I more or less there are as I mentioned the text about great political reform and the emancipation of the Turkish woman, but they are very similar to the Bulgarian one, not so similar to the Greek, but we will try to publish our articles together in English, hopefully, and then you could compare our presentations and the situation that was and the reception of the Muslim women within the Balkans during the interwar period. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being still with us. I know that the time is over, but if there are some questions from the public, we are ready to respond. Yeah, Ayşe Duran Pasha.
I had this question in mind. I wonder whether the Muslim women, I mean, if there were any feminist organizations among the Muslims. Because in Salonika, before the Republic, there were such Ottoman feminist organizations. Salonika was one of the centers. So that's
yeah, okay. Yes, in Thessaloniki, there was also the first feminist journal published in this city. It was Kadim in Norway. Yes, but I don't know if there was an organization, feminist organization. For sure, was a movement. Women went processes, they were going out on the roads, yes, but I don't know if they had any feminist organization. As far as I know, for Thessaloniki, there was not any feminist organization until 1950s, when there was something Muslim. The other thing I would say now, having attended the other presentations while talking about Muslim, what is really important in this collaboration in the Balkans is that at least in the feminist organizations, we study, or each of us from our own countries, non-Muslim women participate. Of course, there are things we can say about it, but Muslim women who lived in Greece, for instance, they do not talk about it. Maybe there is a policy of exclusion, we don't know, but also those women do not have any association, mostly because they are rural women that they are,
I'm not so sure. Probably we should be much more humble and say that we don't know. And no, probably to encourage people to do some research, especially Turkish researchers interested in the period could do that. But I remember, and Biljana is now to intervene, I remember that in Elena Dimitrievic's book, about which Biljana wrote a lot, there are a couple of pages about Muslim women from Thessaloniki.
Oh, no, there is a whole travelogue, actually, her diary from. It's a book, and that book has been translated into English and Italian, 2 letters from Salonika. It was written in 1908 and published. These were really letters to her friend to Belgrade, and she went to Salonika to see what is happening during the Young Turk Revolution, because she heard that the women unveiled themselves, which was not true at the moment, but she also there are pages also about the Jewish Muslim women Dunme, and she writes about them as those who are carrying out the progress. And also in another work of her, I can't really remember right now, but I think it was in one of her travelogues from her travel around the world that she mentions the revolution in Turkey and Kemal Atatürk hoping, and she said, I hope that women will finally unveil themselves, because she really cared about that. But if you happen to find this book, and you can find it, I'm sure, on Amazon, it was translated in 2018 into English. You will also find she made something like a reportage. She spoke to one young Turk woman who was very much engaged in the politics of that movement, and they discussed this issue of the women's liberation. So I can thank you, Krasimira, for reminding me, and I can only recommend it to you.
Thank you. Okay.
Maybe it's not exactly a question, but I saw in Krasimira's presentation, in the first page, at the end of the page, an article by Necile Tevfik. And I was very interested in that. Is it on the civil condition of women in Turkey?
Yeah.
It is. So a little information, the original of this article is in the library. And the same article was also published in Just Suffrage, in La Française, and also in a Brazilian feminist journal. And I just wanted to make this point. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really amazing. Those are entanglements we are trying to investigate, actually, to show how women's ideas traveled around the world and they made really changes in women's lives. As Katerina said, feminists everywhere around the world, they use the periodicals, they use the language and publications in order to spread the word about women's emancipation and the measures that should be done and the struggles that should continue.
Maybe another point is the proposal of the National Council of Romanian Women to the Balkan Conference that also Krasimira pointed out about, you know, exchange of students, exchange of travel, trying to know better literature, open libraries, and also a common currency, which was, I mean, quite an interesting point at that time. So I think that we have, by the handwriting of Alexandrina Cantacuzino, this proposal also at the library, which I think is an interesting point maybe for you.
Absolutely, thank you so much, Leslie. Somebody to add something from the panel? Other comments, questions, disagreements? No. Okay, thank you so much again. I'm looking forward to the next meeting.